Good day, everyone. My name is Tim Hansen. I'm a technical support engineer with the Network Security Group here at Sophos. And today we're going to be looking through or going through how to encrypt a root EBS volume for Sophos UTM on AWS. But we're going to be doing this via the AWS CLI. So I previously did a video which showed what we're going to be doing today on the AWS console versus the CLI. And even though during that video I mentioned that I wasn't going to be covering how to do this on the CLI, as an afterthought, I figured, you know what, since we did include the how-to on the knowledge base article, why not just make a quick video showing you the steps just in case anyone is looking to do the EBS conversion through this way. So in any case, the information in this video is going to be based off of Sophos Knowledge Base article number 132477, and this can be found on the Sophos community page at community.sophos.com. Now, additionally, what I'm going to do at the end of this video is just show you a little bash script I created to automate the steps in this walkthrough. And it makes the conversion process super easy, super simple, with you only having to enter in the instance ID and the region the instance is deployed into. Everything else is done automatically once you run the script. So for reference, I'm going to make the script available for download in the description of this video. So feel free to grab it, use it if you want. Now, just before we get started, I'm going to make a few assumptions. One would be that you already have a running UTM instance on AWS, and reason being is we're, of course, not going to be covering how to deploy UTM on AWS in this particular walkthrough. Number two is that you're okay with a little bit of downtime, as we're going to need to shut down the UTM instance, of course, in order to facilitate the conversion. Number three would be that the AWS CLI is deployed on a Linux host, primarily just because we are going to be making use of a grep command or two to filter out some of the results we get back after making calls to the CLI. So I suppose if you were to deploy the CLI on a Windows box through the command prompt and substitute grep with FineString, then I wouldn't see why this walkthrough wouldn't work for you just the same. In any case, in addition to being deployed on Linux box, you would need to configure the CLI to be up and running in the region to which the UTM instance is deployed into. Number four would be that the AWS CLI is configured or set up with the programmatic keys from a user who has at least the following minimum IAM permissions that you're going to see on the screen here. So if you would like, you could always just put the permissions on the policy for the user to asterisk for EC2, which would open it up to do anything on EC2. But just following along with security best practices and the whole concept of least privilege, I'm going to give you the granular permissions as you see them there. So feel free to set up as you need. Now, assuming we've got all that covered, we can go ahead and move forward. I'll just switch the screen here. There we go. And now you'll see just towards the bottom right portion of the screen, you can see a little screen up there that's going to show the step we are on in the knowledge base article. And I'll scroll down as we move from point to point. This, of course, is mostly just to prevent me from having to alt-tab back and forth or drag the browser window in front of the screen I'm recording on. Okay, so let's see. I am on a Linux host. I already have the AWS CLI installed. I have it configured to be in the region my UTM is deployed into, which is US East 1. Perfect. Clear that. Now, the first thing we're going to have to do is actually just cycle back to the AWS console. so the graphical interface, and we're going to grab the ID of the UTM instance. So this is the only time we're going to need access to the console. So after you've copied the instance ID onto clipboard, you can go ahead and minimize or close that window. Everything else is going to be done through the command line. The first thing I'm going to do is to set my instance ID as a variable in Linux, and you'll see me doing this throughout the article. Really, anytime we need to get or set a ID, whether it be an instance ID, a volume ID, or snapshot ID. So I'm doing it this way just because it's simpler for me to set a variable rather than copying and pasting them into Notepad and then having to worry about copying and pasting them out of Notepad and into the SSH window. So I'll set my first variable. It's going to be called instance, and then if I paste in the instance ID and press enter, that's set. Now I'm going to grab the first command off of step number 1 out of the article, and what I'll be doing it this way as we move along, and that would be to pretty much just copy the command as a whole, paste it into my SSH window like so, and then filling in the blanks where needed. So anytime a user input is required, whether it be typing in an ID, pasting in an ID, or calling the variable we've set, you'll see them in double quotes. I guess I could use single quotes, but for no apparent reason, I chose the double quotes anyways. So let's go ahead and change that to our variable instance, our instance variable, and press enter. So this should, yeah, it does. So we can see the state is stopping. So we know the instance is spooling down or shutting off, and it's going to take a minute or so for it to completely shut off or spool down. But regardless, we can move on to step number 2. There's nothing in step number 2 that specifically requires the instance to be stopped. So I'll copy the command number 2, scroll that down, and paste that into my window. And we can see step number 2 is purpose is to get the volume ID which is attached to the UTM instance. So this is where I mentioned earlier where I'm utilizing a grep command in Linux. If you're on a Windows host, you can just delete the grep and then type in find string, and it'll accomplish the same thing. So I'm grepping for the volume ID because, of course, if I delete the pipe and the grep and just put in my instance variable, you'll see the output is rather long, and it's I don't want to have to worry about scrolling through all this information to find my volume ID, so that's why I've grepped for the volume ID. So let's set our instance variable, and you'll see we've got our volume ID. Easy peasy. So I will copy that onto clipboard, and then I'm going to set another variable called volume1. And the reason why I'm calling it volume1 and not just volume is because this is going to be our unencrypted volume, whereby later on in the walkthrough we're going to create a second volume, the encrypted volume. So I want to be able to differentiate the two. All right, so volume1 is set, and we can move on to step number 3. And step number 3 would be to detach the volume from our instance. Okay, so let's specify our volume ID, or call our volume1 variable. And if we press enter, we should get a state that shows detaching, which is perfect. We know from experience that volumes are pretty much detached from instances instantaneously, so I don't need to wait or wonder if it's still doing its thing before moving on to the next step. We can just jump into it. So step number 4, let me get this straightened out. Okay, step number 4 is going to be to create the unencrypted snapshot based on the volume we just detached from the UTM instance. So let's paste that in. And then once again, we're going to call our volume1 variable. And you can see the description I've named UTM-unencrypted. So like the volumes, we are going to first be creating a unencrypted snapshot, and then off of that unencrypted snapshot, we're going to be creating our encrypted snapshot. So you'll see me calling the encrypted snapshot UTM-encrypted versus this UTM-unencrypted. All right, so I got my volume variable in there. I'll press enter and we can see the state is going to be pending. So it may take a couple seconds to create, but that's okay. We can move right into step number 5. So the purpose of step number 5 is kind of in two-part. Even though in the article it says to get the unencrypted snapshots ID, cryptically, the real purpose is mostly for us to determine whether the snapshot creation process has been completed. So we can actually see when we created the snapshot, it gave us an output that included the snapshot ID. So we can grab the ID from there, or we can paste in, that is not correct. We can paste in step number 5. Press enter. We don't have to enter anything into step number 5 other than what the line included in the article. And we can see two things. We can once again see our snapshot ID, and then we can also see the state pending. So that would, to me, would indicate that the snapshot is still being created, albeit the progress is at 99%. So I bet you if I call this again, it'll be 100%. Yep, it is. All right, perfect. So state is completed, snapshot is done. So let's grab our snapshot ID and set a variable called snap1. Paste in RD, beautiful, and scroll down to there. All right, number 6. Step number 6 is to create our unencrypted correction. Step 6 is to create our encrypted snapshot. And the encrypted snapshot is going to be based off of, like I said before, this unencrypted snapshot we just created. So there's a couple things we have to change in here. One would be the source region. So the source region is the same region the snapshot has been created into, which will, of course, just the same be the region the AWS CLI was configured in, and or the region the UTM instance is deployed into. So for me, this is going to be US East 1. We've got the encrypted flag set, so we know the snapshot is going to be created encrypted. The description is pre-filled out at UTM-encrypted. So the only thing aside from the region we need to enter in would be the snapshot ID for snap1. So we'll call the snap1 variable, and I think that's everything. No, it's not everything. Now, I think I saw something funky like this when I was getting ready for this article. Yes, okay. So if you're copying and pasting the command directly from the knowledge base article, it will work just fine for you. Just the way I have the commands pasted into a Word document, and for some reason the formatting of the double quotes didn't paste over correctly. In any case, not really relevant to you if you're copying the command directly from the article. You shouldn't run into that error. So once we've done that, we can see the output it's going to give us is just going to be a single line, and that's the snapshot ID or the snapshot ID of the encrypted snapshot, which is going to be in the process of creating right now. So I'll go ahead and set my second snapshot variable, which I'm going to call snap2. And we'll do that ahead of time and then move on to step number 7. Step number 7 is mostly just to find out whether our second snapshot is still being created, and I would be willing to bet it is, because that might be a record if it was done creation. Yeah, it's still Still progress 0, so it's still in the pending state. If from experience I had to guess, I would say it's likely going to take 2 to 3 minutes to complete. So while that's doing its thing, we can move right on to step number 8 actually. And step number 8 is going to be to get the availability zone that our instance is deployed into. So the reason why we need this is for the next step that involves creating a volume based on our encrypted snapshot. We have to put in the availability zone to create the volume in. And of course, we want this to match our UTM instance if we have any hope of mounting it to the instance later. So copy step number 8, paste it in. I will once again call my instance variable, and that should give us US East 1A. Beautiful. So I'm not going to set a variable for this. We just remember it and use it for the next step once we get there. So let's check on our snapshot, see how it's moving along there. 0%. Perfect. So I know these progress bars aren't all too accurate. You'll see it'll jump randomly, just suddenly from 0 to like 99% or 100. So don't depend on the progress bar to determine really how much you've got to go. I think what I will do maybe is I'll just pause the video right now, and then I'll wait a couple minutes. And once I see the snapshot at 100% and in the available state, I'll resume the recording. Okay. All right. That didn't take too long at all. I would say about a minute after I paused the recording, the state hit, or the progress hit 100% and state became available or completed, sorry. And that would give us the indication that it's done, of course. So we will just scroll down to step number 9, and step number 9 is going to be to create the volume, our encrypted volume. So if I copy that, paste that, and once again we've got our encrypted flag set. The availability zone is, if I remember correctly, is going to be US East A1A or A1, or I think it's 1A. Scroll up and double check there. Where is it? Oh, no, US East. Nope, that's the region. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Yeah, so US East 1A. Perfect. Okay, the volume type we're going to leave at GP2. And the snapshot ID, it's going to be the second snapshot ID that we got, which is set to variable snap2. Right, I think that looks good. I'll press the enter key and yep, creating. Beautiful. So it's going to take, similar to this encrypted snapshot, it's going to take a minute or two to create. So what I will do is I will grab the volume ID that shows and is displayed, and I will set another volume variable, which I'm going to call volume 2. And paste that in, complete. And then we will scroll down to step number 10. And step number 10, again, is going to be pretty much just for us to determine whether the volume is done its completion, or its creation, I'm sorry. So of course, we're not going to bother to try to attach the volume to our instance if it's still process being created. So number 10, let's paste that in, and sorry, I'll have to pardon the split the way the text is displayed on the screen. I originally recorded this video with the default font size in PuTTY, and after watching it afterwards, you just couldn't see what I was typing out. So I kind of magnified it, but now we get this kind of overlap on the lines when we have longer commands. Okay, so for for step number 10, I think the only thing we need to do is call the snapshot2 or snap2 variable, or put in your second snapshot ID, and then press enter, and we can see the state is available, so we know it's done, it's completed. So we can move right down to step number 11, which would be to attach the volume to the instance. Okay, so I paste that in. I've got your encrypted volume ID, which I know is volume 2, and the instance ID, which is not changed. I'll call that at instance, and that should be it. I'll just note the device. The mount point for the volume is going to be dev xVDA. So you need to have it set to xVDA, otherwise you'll find when you boot up the UTM, it's not accessible. It's not actually going to boot correctly. So assuming you've got all that correct, we'll press enter. We can see the state is attaching, and we know that it takes only a couple seconds to attach a volume to an instance. So we can pretty much move on to the last step, which would be to start the instance. Paste that, and we'll call our instance variable. And beautiful. So we can see the state is pending. And if we cycle back to our EC2 console and refresh the page, we can see it's in pending. So anytime you attach volume to an instance, it takes a couple extra seconds for it to really begin the start process. There we go, running. So I'm not going to wait for the status text to pass. I know it's going to boot up successfully. So what I will do is, because I don't have a second UTM instance running at this moment, I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to terminate this instance, launch a new one, and then we'll move into showing you the bash script I created, okay? So just give me a moment. I'll be right back. All right, so looks like I've got my new UTM all fired up and ready to go. So like I mentioned earlier in the video, the bash script I'm going to make available for download should you want to use it. I'll have the download link placed into the video description once I eventually do get it posted on YouTube. So to run it or to use it, you would just fill in your instance ID and region like you're going to see here in a moment, and then run it like you would any other bash script on Linux. So just for now, before we hop into the SSH session, just open the script in Notepad++. It's a little easier on the eyes to look at rather than opening it in VI or Vim. So it's pretty straightforward. It's simply a matter of entering your instance ID there, and then your region number in typical format. So we're not going to go through the script in any great detail. Just point out one thing, and that would be for the snapshot creation. As you recall in the first section of this video, the descriptions are set to either UTM-unencrypted or UTM-encrypted. So I'm keeping the same in the bash script, with the exception that at the end of the description, I'm tacking on a random number. So this really to keep the snapshots unique between each between each other. So if you do end up running the script on more than one instance, you're not going to have anything conflicting with, having 2 or 3 snapshots with the exact same description. Okay, with that said, let's switch back over to our SSH window. I'm on the same Linux host as I was previous, so I already know my CLI is set up, configured with the right permissions and in the appropriate region. And I'm in the temp folder, and I've got my script already on the hard drive here. So if I VI the script and then go down to the instance, I will have to just hop over to my EC2 console and actually grab the instance ID to paste in. There we go. And I know already that my region is US East 1. So simple as that. We'll save that, exit, and then we'll just run it. Once I do press the enter key here, I'm going to assume that you don't want to sit here and stare at the screen for the next 7 or 8 minutes waiting for the process to complete. So I'll go ahead and fast forward it, and we'll pick up after it's completed. And there we have it. That is done. We got no errors, so we're going to assume that everything finished correctly. And if we switch back over here, we can see the UTM is starting up, so that's excellent. Now, if we switch over to the volumes, we'll have two volumes existing. One being, of course, the encrypted volume, and one being the unencrypted volume. I'll go ahead and delete the unencrypted volume because I don't want the additional costs on next month's bill. So over to snapshots. Again, we're going to have an unencrypted and encrypted volume. And if you look over here under the description, you can see kind of what I was talking about earlier with there being a five-digit random number at the end of the UTM encrypted and then UTM unencrypted description. So again, this is just to retain the uniqueness in case you're doing the conversion process to more than one UTM. So that's about it for today. We're all done. So I guess I will say thank you for watching. And if you do have any comments or questions, just add them below. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.